Good evening, everyone. Myself, Ajit Kanitkar, one of the team members and authors of this book, editors of the book, Farming Futures, Reimagining Producer Organizations in India. A warm welcome to all of you. This is really a multi-location, pan-India kind of a webinar happening. Me sitting in Pune, you see Professor Shambu Prasad sitting in Anand, IRMA, Anita ji sitting somewhere in the mountains, and Professor Vaibhav probably at the foothills of the mountains, if not in the mountains. And then we have Deborah Transatlantic, one of our members in the editing team, and many of our co-authors are also part of the audience or the participants. Really happy to see all of you here. This is the third in the series. And because this is the all of us during last 2 years have got used to the Netflix series, that anything has to happen in a series, not just one, but it has to happen in a series. Today morning I was reading the case study, the chapter that we are going to discuss today, written by Anita ji and Vaibhav. And I must really confess that I was touched by the description that has appeared or that has been carried in our book. And I'll be honest in saying that because we as editors actually read and reread and reread and re-reread and edited and re-edited it several times in the last 1.5 years. So there was a kind of a fatigue. But when I opened the book today morning, the PDF file, I really thought that the writing and the whole substantive part of it, based on the solid work that Grassroots, Mahila Umang and the FPO has done, is really depicted very well. And therefore, I was quite touched by the kind of reflection that has happened thanks to our presenters here, Anita ji and Vaibhav. The book has 15 chapters or case studies, 12 on individual FPOs and 3 on federations. An interesting part of this book is that it's a collaborative effort. Normally, some of us as researchers and professors and academicians go to the field and write about something that we see in the field. We get information from the practitioners and then we document it or write a paper and publish it. This is a different kind of a collaboration. It's a very intensive collaboration amongst practitioners who are working in the field relentlessly, and some of us who are in the profession of teaching research. And therefore, we explored this task jointly. Those of us in practice and some of us who are in research and teaching. And the book is a culmination of that. In addition, we also got substantive information, which we said should not be just let go type. So we as a team sort of curated. Abhishek also is a member of the team here, along with Professor Shambu Prasad. And there is a series of blogs, 44 of them actually, on Small Farm Income website. Of the 15 case studies that are presented in the book was published in April 2023, so just 2 months. We are hoping to get a South Asia edition soon, more about that later. But in the 15 case studies, 7 of them are all women farmers promoted, owned, managed and governed institutions. And the one that we are going to discuss today, Mahila Umang Farmer Producer Company from Uttarakhand, is one of those 7. Another interesting aspect of Mahila Umang FPC that is being discussed today is that it has all women board of directors, and chief executive or CEO is also a woman from the mountains. As I said, it's chapter 7 in the book. The FPO began its functioning in 2007, but there's quite a long history of promotional efforts. We are going to talk about that. And in today's conversation, we have Professor Shambu Prasad and a conversation with the authors. This we will engage, this will take us for about, let's say, 25 to 30 minutes, 5 to 5:30. And the rest 30 minutes, we are going to invite all of you in a Q&A session. Please use the chat box in the meanwhile Uh, Not to share welcome messages. They are probably sent better to private messages, but substantive questions, queries, reflections on the discussion that's happening. And the remaining 30 minutes, 5:30 to 6, we have a kind of an open discussion. Thankfully, this medium allows us to do that. So with this brief introduction, again, warm welcome to all of you to this third series in this book, Farming Futures. And over to you, Professor Shambu, to take this discussion forward.
Thank you very much, Ajit. Yeah, so it's an interesting coincidence that all of us here today have some connection with Anand. I am currently teaching at Anand, but Anita Paul, before her stint, will introduce her shortly. Ajit Kanitkar has been a faculty at IRMA in the 1990s. So it's a pleasure to introduce our panelists, the case authors today. They are the case authors of the Mahila Umang Farmer Producer Company case. It's one of the older cases that we have explored in this. FPC was set up in 2009. In some sense, it is not completely a farmer's FPO because it also includes artisans as well. So there's a little bit of complexity of that kind. It's a pleasure to have Vaibhav Bhamoriya, who's a graduate from IRMA in the 20th batch and is currently a faculty and the Assistant Dean Development at IIM Kashipur. He's worked closely with community-based organizations and farmer producer organizations as a researcher and consultant over the past 2 decades. He's been with a few of the IIMs and currently with IIM Kashipur. His research and consultancy interests include agri-entrepreneurship, sustainability, and producer organizations. Anita is the co-founder of Pan-Himalayan Grassroots Development Foundation, a voluntary organization which spearheads sustainable mountain development initiatives in the Indian Himalayan region. She has actively contributed towards gender-inclusive policies for sustainable development and has had a stint as part of the spearhead team of the National Dairy Development Board a few decades back. So welcome both Anita and Vaibhav. Let me start by asking Vaibhav. Vaibhav, you've been with several leading management schools in India, and very often they do not look beyond the investor-owned firm for their subject of analysis, research, and teaching. So I think we may even be having a person who's joining or is likely to join IRMA in a couple of weeks. Can you tell us, why do you think, from a management perspective, it is important to study producer organizations or collectives? And in particular, what motivated you to research this particular case study?
One of the things that I'm seeing, is very interesting to all business organizations and the institutions teaching about business institutions is what is happening currently in business. And if you look at business, one of the things that is happening currently is this whole concept of VUCA. So there are large-scale uncertainties and stuff happening, disruptions around the world. And these are not only business or technology-oriented disruptions. Disruptions of multiple types are happening, which basically means that the bedrock of business has shifted to 3 words. I'll just put it, and they're interrelated: adaptation, flexibility, and resilience. These seem to be the central theme of any business today. And what they basically, mean to a business is that the business has to figure out new business models. And figuring out new business models to remain adaptive, flexible, and this thing, from markets that were pretty mature, moving in similar directions, we are moving to uncertain markets. And what it means for businesses that you have to scout new business models. And I think so, looking at new business models is an imperative. It's not a choice for business institutions. Though I'll be frank and I'll say most business institutions, business schools are actually lagging in this aspect. We were probably better off in the 90s and early 2000s when we were looking at a lot of other, cooperatives and other things used to be taught specifically in business schools. I think so it's time business schools started looking back again. And, one of this aspect was this, bringing a case to the class, right, which could do this. And second, the other thing I found that Uttarakhand is one of the geographies that has not really been researched by management researchers. management and business researchers have, sort of overlooked Uttarakhand. And as sustainability becomes the buzzword of today, I think so it's very important to look at Uttarakhand because sustainability is intertwined and integrated into life over here, into the culture. And, sort of, so if I were looking for something that is sustainable, I would say that, Uttarakhand should be the first place you look into. The problems of hills are very different. There's no comparison of problems of the issues and challenges of hills with this thing. And Anita ji will talk more about it. She has much more mastery over it. And, sort of, so these things are happening. So Uttarakhand, hills, farmer producer organizations, and then comes the icing on the top. It's a women-led institution. It's been done by women. It's a pure business, development model surviving in the age of markets. And that's what got me interested. How does a pure development model really continue to survive in the age of markets, integrating with markets? I think so that's what is very intriguing about this thing. And I think so that's something that probably, any student or anybody who's working with FPCs can learn from.
Thanks a lot, Vaibhav. We'll come back to you. So, Anita, you spent several years at NDDB before co-founding, along with Kalyan, Grassroots, and then incubating the Mahila Umang Farmer Producer Company. So the first question is, are non-dairy farmer producer organizations very different from dairy cooperatives or dairy producer companies? If so, if they are very different, what processes are worth continuing based on your experiences of being part of the spearhead teams in the past and incubating a producer collective in the last decade?
Good evening to all, and thanks for this opportunity to come and speak with all of you. Firstly, this whole thing about the practitioners and the academicians and researchers coming together, I really enjoyed this journey thoroughly. And I'm so glad that Shambuji, you're asking me about, to begin with, where I started my life was with dairy cooperatives. Now, the thing for me, which is very critical, is if you're speaking of small and marginal farmers, right? And then this whole context of Anand pattern of cooperatives, as we refer to it, it provides the necessary framework, that enables the producers to play a critical role, not just as beneficiaries, but as producers, of course, but also in the whole value chain of engaging with markets, and also have a space, so to say, in the governance structure, right? I mean, to quote Dr. Kurian, who has been a mentor and guru for all these lives, he says that only by collecting all the farmers together do we assist them in possessing a bargaining power, so to say. So if the whole thing needs to begin there, then it does lend a framework that we could all refer to. It's a time-tested framework. Of course, there will be nitty-gritties that needs to change as you go along, but there is something that one can fall back on. So if we have to look at self-governed, democratic, people-centric, small units like the village units at the base, and then look at the three-tier structure, then I think it provides stability going forward. And that is one thing probably that's a big takeaway, which is so far hitherto not really there in the FPO ecosystem, is to look at this three-tier structure and figure out where all we need to strengthen what. Now, having said that, the point is there are differences because it's the nature of the commodity and the value chain that one works with that determines the whole approach to engage with markets and also all the other systems to put in place. From that point of view, dairy cooperatives, everybody feels that it's a much easier commodity to deal with. But I agree that it is an easier commodity because the turnover is faster. But point over there to note is that if the turnover, if that whole value chain, the supply chain was not people-centric and not owned by the farmers, even dairy cooperatives would not have done the job that they were meant to. So this whole thing about the entire supply chain belonging to the farmers, so that the middlemen go, so that there is at least some scope to begin with to start the strengthening process, is a big takeaway. I agree that it didn't happen in the fruits and vegetables, but that's also because, I suppose, because the national government of that time came and saw the strength and hence provided a framework in the way they set up NDDB, which may not have happened in the other commodities. And that, I think, is a critical point. So the whole processes that we going forward, who are now dealing with the FPCs and FPO world, it is for me, what is critical, has to be people-centric, of the people, by the people, for the people, need not necessarily be an outdated kind of a framework. Producers have to own the processing facilities so that they eliminate middlemen, and so that the maximum share of the consumer's rupee we can be attempting to reach it back to the producers. Hiring professionals to manage the whole thing is required, is a challenge, but doesn't mean that it's not required. And another thing that Anand Patton said was, you provide inputs to the farmers to help build up the brand so that they build loyalty towards the brand or towards the organization. So, and the patronage bonus that they had factored in our case, because the patronage bonus has helped us in developing ownership to a very, very large extent. So if you look at the takeaways from what I would take away from this pattern, Anand pattern, these have been critical learnings for us, and we've tried to integrate this in our work in Uttara.
Yes, Ajit.
Anita ji, I have a follow-up question on that. You gave a kind of a huge canvas of the whole producer movement that began in Anand. What are the unique challenges that are specific to the mountain context that Vaibhav also talked in his kind of opening comments? And being a FPO, which is women-owned, women-led, why it's important for women to sort of engage with the market, and when they start engaging with the market, how different or how unique is that kind of an interaction? So essentially, being located in a mountainous terrain, women at the forefront, and they aspiring or they engaging with the market. How does this dynamic sort of work out in the Mahila Umang context?
Thanks, Ajit. So, as Vaibhav has said, mountain ecosystems are unique. It is unique in the sense it plays a very critical role in the economy of our nation. But the point is, it has been so far been a chapter that has been ignored largely. For us, what was critical, what was the bullets that were kind of floating around in front of us, was out migration, was feminization of the economy, lack of opportunities, lack of infrastructure. These are some of the very bold ones that were figuring in the whole jigsaw puzzle at that time. And in today's world, it's very important to add climate exigencies and emergencies to it, because now, while the others have somewhat got addressed in the sense infrastructure has improved a little bit, but this new challenge has entered our lives about climate emergencies. With this, I mean, we as change makers or community development professionals or social entrepreneurs, whichever way we would like to call ourselves, we came across women who were head loading. There was just head loading building materials, so to say. Patthar yahan se wahan was the opportunity that was really available to them. And they were, in a way, the women-headed households. They were raising their kids by doing that. They were also repaying the loans that their husbands had taken and had left them with that burden of repaying, So that invincibility and that zest of life which was in front of us, we figured that in a whole holistic development strategy that we were trying to work at in Grassroots, that something on the livelihoods front had to be addressed. So
yeah. Thanks, Anita, on that, on the context. Now, just switching this discussion to Professor Vaibhav. So how does this context, the challenges, the terrain, the out-migration, the feminization that Anita ji talked about, and all this has a kind of a direct consequence on the business that the FPC does, and the business model that you talked about of the 90s, where management schools were focusing on for-profit, corporate, bottom line, top line, blah, blah, blah. Now, how have you seen in the Mahila Umang case the business model? Or has it static? Has it evolved over a period of time? And as probably women are engaged with several activities, agri, horti, different commodities, agri cycle, the seasonality, and so on and so forth. So maybe if you could share a bit in the complexities in the business model. Over to you, Professor Vaibhav.
Yeah. Yeah, sort of this was probably the most interesting aspect, when I went to do my field visit. Because I think so, for the first day or so, I was lost. And the women were, continuously correcting me, nahi, sir, aisa nahi hai. You need to understand, right? And they would say, ki, aapko samajhna padega yahan pe cheezein hai. You have to go slow and understand. And, it's interesting. Because, one of the basic issues with institution building is that you want to go and talk to people. You want to give them place in ownership. They have to take ownership. It's not that they are ready for ownership. You have to make them ready. You have to build conversations. The issue with mount migration is that I go and talk to a group of people and I go back. Am I even sure that I'm going to get some of the people repeating? Am I going to go and talk back to the same conversation, or am I starting a new conversation every time? I think so. This is a very, very big challenge that mountain economies and mountain ecosystems are facing today. And anybody who's working there, whether it's a corporate, whether it's a FPO, which has to work much more deeper with this thing, right? You need a mooring of people. Now that if that mooring is weak and not available, your business model needs to be that much stronger to keep people intact, to keep this thing. And I think so, sort of the highlight that I saw in Mahila Umang is the way it has been able to amalgamate the people, make the women stand up for this thing, right? And it was very interesting because, sort of as I remember the women telling me the story that we all were first trained in sewing. So one of the first activities that probably they discovered these women could do, they had skills, was sewing. So they said, hum log petticoat silte the. And, many other things that they were doing, alag, adding products. One became a master trainer. So the first master trainer I was able to meet on my field visit, and she told how, she was involved in this activity. And then they said, acha, theek hai, kapda sil diya, ho gaya, now there's a shelf life and use life. And now what else? Right? And then again, the search for, if you want to connect more sisters into the business, you want the business to happen in a way so that, the organization has strength. You need to bring in money for that institution building activity, right? To attempt different things, do different experimentations. One of the things I think, so that's the hallmark of Mahila Umang has been, they have tried out many things. They have not stopped at trying out many, many different things. 10 didn't work, one worked, that one is good enough to take the organization ahead. I think so that pursuit is very important. And that's what the business model is built on. The ability to keep on trying different things, adding in this thing. So it's a very thing. So at the base, I find a very strong network of SHGs. The SHG framework is there. Now, which means that every different activity has different SHGs. So a village can have multiple SHGs functioning at the same time. Now, the beauty of this is that over a period of time, if I'm able to sustain this, there is a very high collectivization that is happening at the grassroots. The strength that this platform gives is probably something on which it is very easy to build the commercials. And I think so this is the hallmark that has impressed me the most about Mahila Umang, that based on this SHG network, the 4 verticals of business as they are today have stood up. So from sewing, we moved to hand knits. People started doing hand knits. Hand knits is a great product. Anybody who's used the product that I have directed to the Umang shop has come back and thanked me for doing so. That Fab India procures from them is a, testimony of the quality and the stuff and the thing they are doing. The internal systems they have to, sort of reward the best performers within them. I think so those are the strengths of the business model. It's not just the external market focus. It's the internal focus and strength, which is very strong. Then you have the Him Khadir. So the farmers coming into the picture, whatever they are growing, coming into this thing, being sold, the PGS system to give them the organic guarantee, connecting them to markets, because one of the issues with what happens in the mountains is it's very easy to do stuff in the mountains. By the time it reaches the markets in the plains, there's always a low quality cousin which comes in and, sort of removes them out of the market, makes them incompetitive on pricing. So you need to find the right type of people who are willing to look for the right product, right? So that's the challenge of Him Khadir. Then there is this whole fruit processing wing, Kumauni, building a brand out of it, and that comes into the picture. So it's not just the farmers, but the horticulture, which is a part of the hills, that also comes into picture, which also works with their basic business of protecting the ecosystem, because we are not looking at small farm systems, we're looking at perennial trees and the perennial ecosystems by working with fruits and the horticulture over here. And then from there, the last thing adds up is the hand weaves, which is now coming. So which is adding to more type of products that is happening, probably takes into account the new things of animal, infestation into the markets and all the, into the fields and all this into the picture.
Vaibhav, sorry to interrupt, but can we just have some numbers to what's the size of the business? How many members are there? Just for our audience to get a sense of.
So the time when I was studying, the FPO has about 1,000+ members. And the membership of FPO has been very smartly, it's not just individual members. There are few individual members from Himachal, but largely it is the SHGs which are members of the FPO. So which means that, it's not a person dependent system. It's a system which is dependent on organizations and the 3-tier setup that we are talking about. So the SHGs being members, SHGs nominate people to be the part of the FPO. And, from there, the boards are being selected. So every business leader has to move up a hierarchy. SHG to being an SHG representative, to being an FPO member, to becoming an FPO board member. So the FPO board members are ripe and matured in handling this thing. And
so Vaibhav, briefly on the turnover, is it a 10 lakh company or,
Yeah. So roughly, what has been happening is that the turnover has been, in crores. It's
Sure.
It's close to 2.5 crores, Anita ji, or what's the number? You're on mute, Anita ji. Yeah, that's fine.
Sorry. Yeah. So the last couple of years, we've been hovering around 160 lakhs, around that.
Yeah.
Give and take.
But the beauty of it is, as I said initially, the pure development model within this business model. We have stuck to a ballpark figure that at least 50% of this turnover goes as income to the individual members. And I think so that's where the FPO is very different from most FPOs that I see around. Yeah.
Okay. So thanks a lot, Vaibhav. Anita, I think a unique feature of the Mahila Umang is its governance structure, and perhaps one of the few FPOs in the country that has both the CEO, staff, and the BODs as all women. So very briefly, can you tell us how was this designed and what are the key features of this governance and management structure? Because you seem to have a process where rotation also happens quite often. So can you just briefly tell our listeners about the management and governance structure?
So the form of organization, as a professional in the field, it's always plaguing all of us that what do we do so that once we exit, the organization comes into being in its full sense, right? So after having spent some time in the mountains, we figured that if they have to survive, it has to be local human capital, has to come center stage. We will build on the capacities. It will be slow. We may not reach phenomenal, within quotes, turnover levels. But having said that, they will be there for times to come. And they will play the critical role, the core mission of improving the quality of life for mountain women. If that's the core mission, then we have to figure a model which is around that. We started with this whole, like earlier also it has been mentioned, this whole SHG movement, because that SHGs has proven to be a platform where a lot of leadership is also happening. It's not just credit and savings, financial literacy, financial transparency, all those factors are getting distilled over there. So from that, we kind of, that became a base. And also, to be honest, we had professionals working with Grassroots on other developmental programs as part of various other programs. So their capacities had been built. And when we did things like organizational development processes or logical framework analysis and stuff like that, they were equipped with all that, and all these issues of hame apne पैरों पे खड़ा होना है, अपने आजीविका के लिए, kept coming out as a need-based assessment. There came a point when these girls and our women and our colleagues and everybody said, we will hide out of Grassroots, because by then the laws of the land were also changing and NGOs could no longer do livelihood programs. And actually, if we had to give a form and they had to outlive us, then it was time for them to stand on their own. They hived out and they formed and gave the whole collective the steam and continue to do so. Having said that, so the leadership comes from the SDGs. Then there is the upward mobility where SDG leaders say, maybe they had some talent on knitting. We upgraded their skills. She became a regional head. And from there, a vertical head. From there, some people moved to the board and stuff like that. So what we are trying to do is the typical HR policy doesn't work. So we have each business vertical, which is led by one person who is the person in charge, so to say. So there are 4 business verticals, and they are like that hub and spoke model where each one is a tight thing. The business is tracked individually. The profit and loss statements are made independently, and each then comes together, and that hub becomes the central figure. Now for the hub, and the hub chooses, the board chooses the managing director, and we also figured that the managing director along with the chairperson of the organization also needs to change, so we rotate, so that this whole thing about understanding what leadership means, what are the pressures, transparency and stuff like that is also experienced by all the professionals. So yeah, we are doing that, but that is a challenge because it also means that the capacity building of the board members needs to be an ongoing process. It's not static. कि हमने 10 लोगों को वहाँ बिठा दिया and then we can give, because every second or third year there are 2 or 3 new people who are coming in. That does remain a challenge, but yes, it has worked well for us because it also builds on ownership, and there is this whole camaraderie, you know, because it is the fact that women can participate in economic ventures only if there is a whole infrastructure and there is a whole support mechanism behind her and along with her, not just behind it.
Thank you. Thank you, Anita ji. So, I think what I heard as a very important point is that you need a different, specific, tailor-made HR system for the region and the context and the organization and the community that you are working with. I think that's a very important point as you were speaking. Toward the end of the first half, I have a question to both of you, and if you could sort of share it a little bit briefly in terms of moving from mountains to the plains of Delhi. How would you sort of advise or build on your learning? Because the government in Delhi and of course in state capitals has an ambition of promoting, nurturing 10,000 FPOs. And of course, the ecosystem, when you started in the mountains and promoted the FPC and the Mahila Umang activities about 10 years back, I would say. But what would be your learnings or do's and don'ts to the promoting organizations whom the government is sort of cajoling and sort of encouraging to promote and to nurture FPOs? What would those 2-3 straight pointers would be? Maybe Anita ji first and Professor Vaibhav later. These 10,000 FPOs, if they have to be done well, do 1, 2, 3, don't do 1, 2. Yeah, maybe 2-minute pointer.
I'll try my level best to be within 2 minutes. I would say that, see, when I started my professional journey, I joined the dairy board, I was given the mandate, increase women participation. Even today, this whole question of engendering FPOs remains by and large, it's facing all of us. I can, there is no fixed prescriptive model that we can give, but I must submit that there is a strength in numbers. And that strength in numbers, so when we say like all women, say the SDG movement, say the Kutumbashri model of Kerala, say that where the whole thing is focused, the staff, the membership, the whole value chains, it kind of lends itself. There is a strength in trying to do that for women farmers to find their rightful place. Secondly, I think all social enterprises, we have this hybrid mission, dual mission, that it has to be social and it has to be economic both have to go. It's like two sides of the same coin, you know, it has to go together. So the nature of value chain will determine agri-based, handcraft-based. They are amenable, you know, they are the kind of value chains where women farmers can play a proactive role. So strengthening this hybrid focus, both should be there, and also
things to avoid, must not do.
Must not do. I think this whole thing of a quick fix, you know, within 3 years, everything should be in place. You know, when people, what is happening is that bonding between the members also needs to be done. You know, this whole thing of, so my point is that this whole thing of digital and financial inclusion, that is the buzzword today. Actually, I do want to take this platform and flag the issue that probably, you know, we need to go back to the drawing board and actually figure out, do we have those products which are actually farmer-centered, which keeps this climate emergencies and everything in focus. We can't take, even we are not being able to access loans out of the SBI. It's
so Vaibhav, your don'ts and do's. Your don'ts and do's.
You know, sort of, so for me, it is very clear. Business means money in the larger world. And unless until our FPOs don't have money in hand, we are not going to go to any number of FPO. So we have to find a way so that they have money which is benign, which allows them to do things that they feel they need to do. Because it's a farmer-owned organization and, you know, sort of that thing. And I think so one of the things that it is, you know, sort of creation of more funds. Do we really have funds for 10,000 FPOs? If you are saying that FPOs is a more difficult business, then more money is required, right? We can't say that it's a startup and just like we say a Startup India scheme, take 25 lakhs, you do a startup. That is not possible for an FPO. Second thing is we need professionals. We need a lot more professionals who are trained to work for FPOs and not the development sector in general. I think so that time has come. We need to focus on that, because unless until those professionals are not available, it's very difficult to get the farmers to, you know, sort of become market focused and integrated with markets. The third thing, the knowledge. I think so where I see, you know, sort of where I'm very thankful to this opportunity of creating this case is the frameworks, the financial ratios that probably we should be looking at FPOs to evaluate their performance, you know, which helps FPOs become better in the larger system of scheme. Right, I think so this thing, because then that data gets aggregated and that comes to the policy level. So what policies need to be formulated out of it? If the metric of evaluating an FPO is different, then the policy automatically becomes different, because the data that it's going to be based on becomes different. Right, so those knowledge and frameworks is very important. What does not need to be done is, I think so what currently happens is anything that comes from the mountains reaches the market of Delhi. There is a cheaper cousin of it, a bad quality cousin of it that can be grown in Noida and can enter into the markets, right? And if the business which is market focused is profit oriented and the customer has very little knowledge about quality, then obviously this cheaper cousin is going to win the market. I think so we need to have specific things to avoid this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. And one thing, you know, another thing that I find very interesting about Mahila Umang over here, which gives it a lot of strength and bargaining power that FPOs can learn from, is it did not take a bank SHG linkage or a bank loan. They have financially kept themselves independent, which allows them to take a lot of independent decisions. So they're not compromised on agreeing to, you know, sort of follow a tide. That's a very interesting thing also, you know, that independence to FPOs would be very interesting. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, both Anita and Vaibhav, for these very interesting insights. So we'll start by taking up a few of the questions that are here. The easy one is by Naresh Punche, who talks about the resource institution which was hand-holding this. Does it come under SFAC, NABARD or SRLM? The answer is none of the above. All of this was established before, and therefore we need to look at institutions that are free of some of these kinds of systems. But related to this is a question which I would like Anita to respond briefly. Parthasarathy was asking this point of why is it that you change from a cooperative to, you know, an FPC format, because the compliances of the latter seems to be quite high. And we were just discussing earlier about the fact that you also need to pay taxes. So one thing I do see is the fact that as a producer company, you're now able to move, you know, easily from Uttarakhand to Himachal you can move across states. But what motivated you to move from a cooperative to a producer company format?
Actually, this was a decision which was taken in the general body, and we had this huge, the pros and cons of both were put forward. Somehow, the whole, what should I say, it's not a stigma is the wrong word, but we all felt that the cooperatives are not robust market bodies, and that ये बिचारा syndrome is there कि ये cooperative है, ये state, हम अपने ही state level तक रह जाएंगे, हमें तो देश तक जाना है, ये सारे जज्बे थे. That was one point of it. Also, we felt that there was no interference at the local state level. Everything is online. We have to employ a good CAS. And so we felt that, maybe we get out of that, that it is a little more progressive, so to say. These were the kind of thoughts that went through our mind, and looking at the markets and looking at the way the world was evolving, this was a more robust way of going ahead. And we thought that agar surplus hai to hum tax denge. This was like all bullets that theek hai, hum acha kar rahe hain, hame tax denge. What's the problem? Yeah.
Thanks for sharing these insights from the general body. It was obviously not a decision taken only by the the promoting institution.
FPOs are the aspirational word. If you want to do anything in rural, you have to be FPO, not Bechara cooperative. I like that.
Yeah. So Vaibhav, this question is to you from Ankit Kumar. He says, metro cities, you have marketplace like Zepto, Instamart, Blinkit, etc. They're dealing at large scale and providing fresh fruits, vegetables, groceries, and so on. They're aggregating the material from nearby areas. So what are the opportunities can we look for the FPOs working in remote areas in mountains of Uttarakhand and maybe other parts in the same? What approach these FPOs should look at towards engaging themselves in a more consumer-centric market?
One of the first things is if my marketeer is concentrating on 10-minute deliveries, they cannot think about quality. They just think about whatever I get, just bring it, because the focus is on that 10 minutes. Right. And I think so that's where a lot of these models are not amenable to FPCs. Right. I think so that's the first thing. I'll be blunt on this, right? So I find that, sort of somewhere there's going to be an issue. So what do we do? So we need somebody who's a large stock house who knows where to stock these FPO products, so that these guys find these FPO products very useful for these 10-minute, 30-minute, whatever, delivery structure that I have in this business. So I need to figure out where to stock, what to stock at the plains near the markets. I think so that's a very important thing that FPOs will need to do. And one FPO may not have the amount. Now, there's a very beautiful thing. Somebody who's working at the plains, a business person might need a large ticket size. But these suppliers might make it possible even for smaller ticket size to happen. That's one thing. The second thing from the FPO side, I think so, apart from these players, there's ONDC, which is coming up and which is a big important thing. But we need to figure out how can we do this, right? And that is very important. The other thing, sort of these markets, these players, if once they have the stability that they can take that position that I am here to stay for 10, 15 years or whatever, then they start working in partnership mode. They're not just looking at fulfilling orders and quantities. They start looking at suppliers who are regular suppliers. I think so that's where the FPCs become a preferred, sort of partner or supplier to these business models. So I would say once these business models are in that zone, it is very important for them to look beyond, sort of very, very nominal numbers and stuff like that, and work out partnerships, evolve systems and ways, sort of this thing, so that the mountain products are not only competitive, but they are very, very important to these businesses, because I have a quality product coming from the hills and I have a less quality product coming from somewhere else, and I can blend it to make an offering which is economical and, preferred by the consumers. So I think so in that blending sense, once they start looking at their business model at that level, it's going to be very important.
Thanks, Vaibhav. I think let's go to the first question that Geeta had raised much earlier. We are also happy to have Kalyan join us. And Anita, please do suggest if you want other members of Mahila Umang as well to come and participate in the discussion. So Geeta Oza's question is, with climate change and its impact, how has Mahila Umang been able to address the impact of this with climate change? So how, this whole question of flexibility, adaptability, resilience, which Vaibhav was saying from a business sense, how does it operate with the members themselves, especially with climate change? What's happening on the hills?
So basically, we are grappling with it, to be honest. So we have to, new ideas keep getting added on, new products are being, for instance, a very simple thing, the number of sunny days is reduced. Okay, so before the monsoon comes on, which has impacted our pickle making, because pickle of mango pickle and garlic pickle needs bright sunshine. Right now we are fortunate, so we are going helter-skelter, just making that pickle up. I'm just saying that if you do a business planning, we've removed mangoes, we've reduced garlic, we've added on dehydrated garlic flakes. So there are these pilots that you carry on doing at one point at the processing level. On the production level, I think Sunita and all my colleagues who are here, they all are going back and figuring out this whole thing about millets, for instance. This is the International Year of the Millets. But the point is, the MSP which the government gave this year, maybe it's not there next year. There is no guarantee. We got a very good price for finger millet this year, but what's the guarantee that it's going to be there next year? The question that, okay, we increase the acreage, and then what do we do with it? There are mandis which has been set up. Mandis don't come up. When we go there, wo bolenge, hamara abhi procurement nahi ho raha. So my point is that this whole thing about building resilience, ultimately a market also has a huge role to play. It is products, it is processes and markets also. And the whole agripreneur B2B models we are trying to strengthen. The thing is, they also need to be, so to say, brought on board. They're not there. They're there today. They're not there tomorrow. What's the guarantee that they're going to be there? So we at Umang are trying to look at new ways of doing things. We are looking at agripreneurs. Some IRMAs, for instance, have set up businesses in the thing. We are figuring out whether you can, in a way, get into a relationship with Umang, and not just as a market thing. You also then become a resource person and maybe, tweak around with some of the extra services that any FPO requires, right? Like some of the CEO functions, so to say, because all the CEO functions currently cannot be done by the appointed managing director. So maybe, and because we are going to take a percentage of the commission of sales, we are not putting a salary burden on the FPC. We are providing a service and hence taking a charge. These are some innovative ways that we need to look at, and we are looking at more and more IRMAs, and we are inviting them on board to come up and be there, because FPCs and these private sector players can have a role to play going forward. And and we have to think out of the box, because having CEOs at all points of time may not be possible going forward.
Thanks, Anita. So I'd like to take Chand Bhaskar Singh's question here, and Kalyan, please feel free to join the conversation. So Chand Singh says, great work at cracking the HR issue so early. The dilemma between sustainable HR and qualified HR is very real. Replacing key managerial staff every 6 months doesn't seem to help the cause. What do you have to say?
No, not every 6 months. We are not changing every 6 months. Every 5 to 10 years, depending. But the chairperson, there's a term, right? There's a fixed term on the MOA where the board needs to move. So according to those rules that has been put in place, we change, which I think they can be re-elected 3 terms. So I think it's every 9 years that you need to retire. Because we have come into the 15-year cycle, so that cycle has kicked in for us, and so there are people rotating as and when the term is over.
Yes.
The managing director, we are not doing it so frequently, but yes, we are doing. I mean, I think we've turned around, if I'm not mistaken, twice.
Yes, yes. And also, I think so, the challenge of bringing in more younger members into it to ensure the continuity of the organization. So younger leaders being promoted.
So that's the other thing which I forgot on to say, that we have this concept of a shadow team leader. Every vertical, along with the so-called in charge, there is another person whose grooming has started, because experiential learning and learning on the job works better. So just in case something happens, there is some health issue and all that, we don't come up on a van. There is a person who knows the whole gamut of affairs. So that shadow team leader, again coming, I think, out of the NDDB experience when we were placed in the district.
Well, from moving from NDDB to NABARD scheme or the new SFAC scheme, Richa Kushwaha has a question. I think she's researching NABARD supported FPOs. So her question is, how to manage this professional HR problem in the less salary as given stated by NABARD? Do you have any magic wand that can solve this problem?
So we didn't find anybody. So we are just going back to the human capital from the region.
So,
I think, Kalyan, you want to say something, then please do.
Yeah, Kalyan, you can, yeah, please.
Yeah, Kalyan has raised his hand. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to bring in a point with Ajit mentioned, I think that, this is a great thing that the national government has, sort of see the vision of 10,000 FPOs, right? So that's a fantastic thing if it can happen. But some of the answers which you're looking for in this webinar and, elsewhere is actually is not blowing in the wind, is blowing in Anand, right? Because suppose we had milk cooperative unions at the district level to just play the game on their own, they would have never been able to be successful at the state level or at any level, In fact, the story of Anand itself, when it started, there was a fierce competition between Kaira district and Baroda district and the different unions, till the federation, the concept of the Gujarat Milk Marketing Federation came up. So taking a leaf out of that lesson is very, very important, that all these FPOs we are trying to create, if you bring it down to a state level, like say, for example, where Anita has been working in Uttarakhand. So there are lots of other FPOs which are emerging over there, thanks to several bilateral aid programs and various other programs of the state government, right? But there is no coalition of interest between such FPOs and the oldest and the leading FPO called Umang within that state. So that formation of that coalition, which is very, very important to, cut short the problem which Vaibhav was mentioning over and over again, that the same kind of products come in the market and they jostle with each other. It will not happen. That's what Amul demonstrated in the Milk Marketing Federation, that actually everybody stands to gain if they form a federation, So that is missing. Now, why that is missing, I just take 30 seconds more, is because it's very good to say we want 10,000 FPOs. It's like very good for the Prime Minister of India in the 60s to have asked Dr. Kurian, do this, roll this out in the whole country. And Dr. Kurian agreed with it only by saying that a national level dairy development board is required as an umbrella organization, which will sort of be the custodian and shepherd the whole program. And if not for the dairy board, we would have never seen a revolution in the milk sector. Okay. So in the FPO sector, you need one organization, and I'm sorry to say it's not NABARD, because NABARD is a bank. It's already busy for last 30 years, and let them be busy for another 30 years, but let them not get their fingers into this FPO business, So you need a brand new organization.
I just one comment. I'll reserve my observations about the Apex institutions for some other context or for some other meetings. But I think I would like to myself to remind of what Professor Vaibhav mentioned in the beginning in terms of the importance of context. Anitaji's points on the whole out-migration, the feminization, women being left behind, the whole terrain which is difficult from one village to another village. If you need 7 hours to walk, and the quantity that is produced and then aggregated. So I think all this FPO 10,000 to be of the same color, of the same taste, of the same format, of the same BOD structure, and of the same business size is a little bit out of context. And we are a diverse country. In the chapter that I wrote with my colleagues, we have a chapter on the tur dal of Hasnabad in the dryland regions of Telangana. Now, how a Telangana FPC would be the same as a Mahila Umang FPC of Uttarakhand? and we have a West Bengal FPC, and we have in our first series talked about a Gujarat FPC. So let each FPC would have its local flavor, whole context specificity, and the response, which is dynamic, the business model. So I was just reminded by Kalyan's observation on this 10,000 FPCs that we don't need 1 into 10,000 X kind of thing. We need 10,000 special purpose, specific, different colors, different tastes, different flavors, different business models. I just wanted to make that point. Sorry, over to you, Shambu.
Thanks a lot, Ajit. Yeah, and thanks a lot, Kalyan, and in some sense, Anita, for bringing the institutional memory that we are kind of missing. I think this demand that, you can't talk about the dairy development movement of Amul and Nandini and Avin, etc., without the role of NDDB having, in some sense, supported and incubated. And we are talking of the FPO movement without a similar kind of institutions. In some sense, many are struggling around. So I'll just take the last question very briefly from Gaurav Yadav, who's asking this question: what's the role of technology in Mahila Umang to enable agri-smart practices in the hills? Or, you can just, how do you look at technology? That might be a broader kind of question in the kind
Thanks, Gaurav. That's been of huge importance for us. But having said that, we've had the challenge of finding technology that could be managed by the people from the village, number one. Even today, we are having power cuts. So anything to do with electricity, for the first time, we were trying to experiment with dehydrators, which runs on electricity, and we are already figuring out who will do the evening shift, because it's just not there in the daytime. So we have technology for things like, especially for post-harvest storage. There are dehumidifiers, there are vacuum packing machines, all these things which improves the shelf life of the agri-produce. Without technology, I don't think it's possible. But it has to be people-centric technology, which kind of can be managed by them. Because we did bring in a compressor and figured that we were just floundering around with it, and that also needed electricity. So it went back. We went back to sealing our jams with beeswax and turned that into a USP, which can be done manually, because there are no jams in the market which are actually sealed with beeswax, because organic jams, you need to seal since there are no chemicals for longevity of life. So yeah, so there are these things called appropriate technology we are trying to bring in every now and then. Dehumidifiers, because there's excess moisture up in the mountains, so our storage rooms get completely moldy. So stuff like that, yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we've come towards the end of the hour that we had planned. It's been a fascinating conversation. And thanks a lot to Anita and Vaibhav for both writing this lovely chapter, which I'm sure others are going to read, and also for sharing your insights of a very, very fascinating farmer-producer organization. Things are not replicable in strict sense, contexts are different, but there are design principles that we would like to try and maintain across. So thanks a lot to Ajit for helping moderate this. Also to all our participants who have been very actively asking questions. Some of them who wanted to ask questions and could not. Some who had to leave early. We will have a recording of this, which we will share with all of you. So thank you all for taking this up. And I'd like to finally also thank the Small Farm Incomes team for the support, Abhishek in particular. In some sense, Abhishek's PhD thesis is kind of looking at 2 FPO federations, which is something that Kalyan alluded to. So, again, that's a key issue. The 10,000 FPO policy has absolutely no support mechanism to enable FPO federations in each of the states. There are 2 case studies. There are 3 case studies on FPO federations, and we hope to try and have possibly a physical meeting where we can try and address some of these issues which is plaguing the FPO ecosystem. So thank you all very much. And from the hills of Uttarakhand, we will be moving to central India, where we're going to look at tribal farmers, again a women-led FPO in the Kanker district of Chhattisgarh, on the 23rd of June, where Nikhila Shastri and Neeraj Joshi will be sharing their experience. So please do look forward to join that conversation as well. Thank you all very much for a great evening.
Thank you. That was lovely.